5. Most of the time, left Alaman and then do-side-do. Left Alaman with the ring. I was a young troubadour. All right, here we go. Another Square Dance Callers Talking. Tonight, I've got Paul Bryant-Ott. Where are you, sir?
Well, sir, I am from Grand Blanc, Michigan. So
Okay.
a lot of people don't know where that is. So we can look at it a couple different ways. I'm about 10 miles south of Flint, if you know Flint, with the water crisis and everything,
Yeah.
or about hour and a half north of Detroit.
Okay. Now, I know a few people not Square Dance related from Michigan. Were you born and raised there? How'd you get to Michigan?
I was. I actually was born in Detroit.
Mhm.
My father was a kind of strange stories there. He was a mechanic, and he worked down that way. And we were at 8 Mile and Gratiot, which is not the best neighborhood. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. And they were trying to get out at some point, and eventually the neighbors got robbed. Um, while they were sitting on the front porch, and my mom said, "That's it." So we ended up moving up to Washington, Michigan, which is a little bit east, about an hour east of me. And I born and raised between Detroit and there. Eventually, my decision of what I was going to do with my life was well, I didn't want to be a college guy at the beginning. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So leading into this story a little bit, I had been just getting into square dancing a little bit, and I had somebody tell me uh, by the name of Larry Letson, by the way,
Yeah, I
sat
know
down.
Larry.
I sat down in a hotel room one time. And he told me, "Go get your college degree." He said he saw the decline in square dancing in the '90s, and he
Mhm.
said, "Go get your college degree," because I thought I was going to hit the road and maybe become a, I don't know, traveling caller of some sort.
Okay.
So ended up living in Washington, graduated from high school there, and following Larry's lead, I went to college, ended up at Wayne State University, and eventually, when I figured it out after 6 years, decided to become a teacher.
Okay. So, how long did you teach, and what ages and stuff like that?
All right, so I started teaching in '94, and I taught for 30 years. I taught 18 years of math, and then the new math came in, and that wasn't for me. And
Okay.
so I decided, well, I'm still going to teach the old school math, and they didn't like that. So I ended up moving over to science. Did some science years, and then there was a couple odds and ends years here and there of a couple different things. And then I finally finished out the last 10 with technology. So we started with kind of like office technology, Microsoft Word and stuff like that. And that was back in the day when I wanted to teach technology. They handed me a computer lab and no software and said, "Here you go." And so I pieced together everything. And at the end of, I retired in June of last year, and we finished out with drones and robotics and 3D printers and laser
Okay.
cutters. And I had instigated all that into the, so we had really grown from here's a computer, figure out what you're going to do with it to, hey, we got some really cool stuff. So
That's awesome.
it was a good
Okay.
ride. It was a really good ride.
I'm sure that's a feeling of accomplishment. So you retired fully now? Or are you doing anything on the side
Well, fully
besides
right.
square dancing?
Yeah,
We'll get to
besides
that.
square
But
dancing, no, I'm still fully. I'm getting a lot of house projects done that just
okay,
always seem to get ignored for quite some time. So, but
understand.
yeah, we're getting to the antsy stage a little bit. If I'm gonna really get into this, or I'm gonna, pick up a part-time job, I just haven't found anything I really want to do yet. And that's kind of what I kind of decided that, if I'm gonna do something other than square dance calling right now, it's gonna be something I really want to do. I don't want to just do it to do it.
Gotcha. So Larry Letson gave you some advice on college. When did you start calling? When did you start dancing? Let's do that.
Well, let's
When
go
did you
back
start
to
dancing?
dancing. Well, that's an interesting story too. So, my parents were actually getting involved in a little bit of dancing.
Mhm.
And my grandmother lived in Florida, Tampa, Florida area. And she
Nice.
called him up
Okay.
one day and she said, "Hey, if you'll take me to the Ontario National Camporee, Square Dance Camporee, I'll pay the way." So she took the whole family to the Ontario, which was in Tillsonburg, Ontario. And so the kids all, I have two brothers, and we all got drug along. And so while the parents were dancing during the camporee along with my grandmother. They have a kids program where the kids get to do a whole bunch of activities, art activities and horseshoes and games. And but one of the activities was square dancing, and
Okay.
none of the kids really wanted to do it, but because you were there, you had to kind of, it was the teen thing. You just kind of had to do it. And I think a Saturday night we put on a one dance or one tip demo for the parents, and it was your basic party night kind of things, you know. But the interesting thing about all that is, and you probably know this guy, I'm going to guess, but I wanted nothing to do with that.
Sure.
And neither did my brothers or anybody else until the gentleman that was teaching the kids square dancing was about probably about 20 years old, 22 years old. He goes by the name of Tim Crawford.
Okay. Oh, I know who Tim is.
Oh yeah, well, Tim Crawford to me was the first young person I'd ever seen um, as a square dance caller,
Okay.
and I don't know what tipped the scales, but I said something to my parents along the line, well, that wasn't so bad, and they were smart enough to run with it. So in 1982, they took me to a square dance class with their caller they had been with for a couple years, and his name was Doug Reek. Uh,
Okay.
and
Don't
he
know him.
was, yeah, he was just a local guy. He did a little bit of traveling, but pretty much just local to Michigan.
Okay.
But back then, Michigan had 20 clubs within an hour of Waterford or his place, and kind of where I'm at now, there was probably another 20 or 30. Um, so I went up to Doug. I'll never forget. I went up to him. Kind of a funny story. We went to a square dance, and I won't name the caller, but the dancers were dancing about 4 calls ahead of the caller. And
Right.
except for my square was dancing with the caller because this is the first time I'd been to see this guy. And halfway through the dance, I looked at my mom, my mom had to dance with my dad and I because I didn't have a partner. And I looked at my mom and I said, "Well, I think I could do that." And just kind of jokingly, and she said, "Well, maybe you should." And I think
Yeah.
that was the second bug. So Tim Crawford with the first one, and then my mom and this guy with the second one. And so I went up to Doug, who was teaching me, and he said, "Well, you have to get through A1." And I think he was really looking at me saying, "You're a young kid, and I'm not so sure you're really into this. This is just, you know,
Right.
fad kind of thing." And Doug had taught Johnny Preston. Uh,
Nice. Okay.
yeah, so the only other color he had taught was Johnny Preston. And I said, okay. And at the time, there was a round dance cuer whose daughter wanted to learn A1. And I ended up getting thrown into the A1 class at the same time I was taking plus. And I think Doug was waiting for me to take another year of lessons. And well, because Marilyn's daughter needed a partner, I got through A1 in the same year that I asked Doug originally to be a caller. And so, true to his word, he said okay, and he started teaching me to call. I started with him in 1984, doing some calling,
84. Okay.
and then about when I graduated from high school in '86, I'll never forget my parents' gift to me from graduation was a Newcomb. I don't remember what version, but it was huge and heavy. I remember that. And then I believe somebody told me it was a Clinton speaker. It was a half round or a moon shaped blue vinyl speaker. And
Wow.
that was what I got. One of the microphones, it was about this long. And, you know, it was the start of something. Um,
Okay.
and where Doug was awesome with me. He's passed since, but he would like hide behind the curtain on stage and I'd call and then he could tell when I was losing it and get nervous and
Right.
he would tell me what to call from behind the curtain so that I
Right.
could say it in time so that the dancers could dance it in time. So Doug was phenomenal. I mean, he had a mind that was amazing. Like back in those days, they had quarterly selections and they were
Right.
calls that came out once a quarter. Well, he'd open the mail at the dance and read the quarterly selection definition, and he'd have it in a singing call the next two. I mean, he was phenomenal. I never got any of that from him. It never rubbed off, but he was just an amazing guy that could look at anything. You could say, "Hey, how do you do a left-handed inverted motivate or whatever?" And he'd be okay, and he'd throw it in the next. And he was phenomenal at teaching.
Yeah.
Um, he was phenomenal at calling. His timing was impeccable. He was just a local caller who never really did any traveling other than local. And I was privileged to have to work with him. And unfortunately, I look back at it like any kid who was I always attribute it to a band kid who has an instrument but never practices at home.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I felt with calling. Looking back now, yeah, I took a lot, but I didn't give a lot. So
Right.
that was kind of a shame on me, and I think every kid does that, but and even some callers still do that. I wish Doug was still around in a lot of ways that there's so much I could have got from him that, oh man, I wish I would have, but shoulda, coulda, woulda is how that works. But I kind of would go to dances when I eventually like, I started with a workshop and taught my first class. I think that was 1988, I think was my first class. And then I think by 90, I had clubs offering me jobs. And that was because I was young, I think, and colors were getting out at the time. And I was just, and I ended up taking a job. I took, unfortunately, I lived in Washington and I took a job in Flushing, which was about an hour away, hour and a half away,
All right.
6 nights a month as a college kid trying to make it through college and unfortunately college was the other way because I could have gone to a local college but it was a lot more money and
Sure.
my parents had told me at the time they said when I told them I wanted to just do calling because I didn't know what I wanted to do for a career and I think at the time they said well you know what you can live here and not go to college and you can pay $600 a month rent and back in that day, $600 was,
Yeah.
I get the message, Dad. I get it.
Yeah.
So I ended up driving to Wayne State in Detroit
Okay.
4 days a week to go to college. And then driving, Flushing was probably 2.5 hours from Wayne State to go do calling up there. But that was my first run.
Okay.
But I was a sight caller. And that's what I learned. And I will say I never really stretched my legs very much because, one, I don't think I really had the time. I was trying to go to school, trying to study, and I was probably over my head a little bit in some ways,
Sure.
but I got comfortable and I could sight call pretty good. I still made mistakes
Yeah.
like anybody else, and I just didn't practice. I just didn't have the time to practice. So I think I probably got a little boring at times too. Um, I will remember when I first started. This was before all the clubs, but I never had time to do any practice, so I wrote everything on paper.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget. There was a night I was at Doug's dance and he let me do a tip. He let me do a tip every time, so at least one or two. And I'm reading off the paper and I'm reading off the paper and I'm not looking up. I'm just reading and reading because I had gotten checkers out at that point and I had worked a little bit of stuff that I thought was
Mhm.
cool. And it was not a short sequence. That was the other thing. I know now, hey, 8, 10 calls and
Yeah. He's been
resolve,
getting it.
this was probably 25, 30 calls. I mean, it was deep.
Yeah.
And it was cool though to me and I happened to look up and nobody's dancing. And I don't know how long it had been like that
All right.
because I skipped a line and I was never so embarrassed in my entire life. I think I went home and I threw away all the written material I had. I threw it all up. And that's when I became a total sight caller. And that's what Doug was. He was a very seldom. The only thing I ever saw him write was for challenge or for A2. Everything else was mathematical right here and he was good. I mean, I aspired to be that guy. Without practicing, of course, though.
Yeah, I've got kind of the same thing on that. There's a few times early on, I just thought, well, I'm just going to write all this stuff out and
Yeah,
read it,
yeah,
and it's just like that. Even if I was watching them, when I looked down, I didn't know where I was, and I was like, okay, now they're not moving,
right.
and one of the worst things is start stopping,
Yes,
if you're calling, and
yes,
that's a problem with reading. But then when you lose, and I didn't write down corners, I didn't know who was with who because
right,
why bother? Because I'm reading it. And
right.
so then you're just like,
Then
and
you're like,
so
yeah,
yeah,
yep,
there comes a point where you're just like, this isn't worth it. If I want to do this, I got to figure out site
exactly,
or learn modules, whatever.
right.
Um, Going back to like Tim Crawford and them and Doug,
Yeah.
was it the choreography or was it the
No,
singing, the music?
no.
What hooked you? Do you thought I want to do that?
If you know Tim, um, he's just a likable guy. He's got a quick wit. He's got maybe a little sarcasm. He's got
Mhm.
just funny attitude, and I think that's what did it for me. I was the introvert kind of, and he entertained me, the
Okay.
showman, if you will. He did it very well, and I think that's what really hooked me. I don't think choreography for kids because it was just a one night
Right.
thing. There was nothing there for choreography for me. Singing, he could sing but I think it was just his playful banter and the way
Okay.
he would just make things easy and just have some fun with it. I mean, there was a lot of guys I remember over the years, and the ones I liked the most were always the ones that had more fun up on the mic. They were just prancing around, having a good time, making a few jokes. Hey, Joe, how you doing back there? Just stuff like that. And that was Tim. So I kept going to that camporee for I think for 8, probably 12 years beyond there. Um, and Tim was there most of the time. And I even got to call there. So that was my first family to actually see me kind of grow up from a kid who didn't even know how to square dance, more or less. And then I was calling. So that was the end of probably after about 8 years, I was calling there. Sorry, probably after about 5 years, I was calling there. I was
Okay.
going. So it was probably 2 years for I didn't tell him I was calling for a couple of years. And then somebody told somebody. And next thing you know, okay, you're on the list. So I think there was two of us young kids, guys. Aaron Goodman was another one.
Mhm.
His son Stephen Goodman was out of Ontario or out of Canada somewhere, and Stephen was a caller as well under his dad. So we still talk back and forth a little bit on Facebook every once in a while. And
What do you think you enjoy the most now, or is there a difference when do you want to entertain? Is it that you more into the choreography? Do you like singing? What's your favorite part of it, if you have one?
I would say it's entertaining. Uh,
Okay.
for me, it's just I try to. I don't tell jokes and I don't do that kind of thing. I think it's just the way I convey myself on a microphone. And it's almost sometimes it's like I look back and go, how did you ever become like that? You just get that playful kind of
Yeah.
have a good time. And you to look at a couple of videos on my YouTube, and I'm sure you'll see some of that as you look. But I just enjoy having a good time with people, and I love the people. Well, and I don't do a lot of club calling, hardly any club calling anymore. When my club folded in 2005, my boys were like 3 and 5, so it was time for me to. It was a perfect segue, in all honesty,
Sure.
and it was hard for me to give it up because I loved square dancing, but I was also to the point where I was at make or break it time. It had been too long for me at that point that I needed to really get serious about going to the next level or challenging myself with choreography or something because I was with the same club for 15 years, I think. And at that point, I'm like, I need something more for me. And I don't know what that's going to be exactly. And when that club decided to fold, that was my way of getting out of the activity in a lot of ways. Raised my family. I've got two wonderful boys, one in the Air Force, one in the Navy Reserves, hoping to be an officer, maybe in a nuclear program. And at that point, it was time to raise those kids. And I never really gave up on square dancing. I continued with the party nights, and that was where I kept my foot in the door and kept doing party nights.
Okay.
But I want to back up a second too because I forgot
Yeah, yeah.
part of the other part was in the early days. So this is after Tilsonburg and after Tim Crawford and all this stuff. I ended up going to a Michigan State convention and calling at the state convention, and I was still pretty young. This is 94. No, this is about 90 or sorry. I'm trying to remember exactly. Late 80s, early 90s. Anyways, I met my wife at the Michigan State Square Dance Convention. She got
Okay.
drug along by her parents because she had nothing
Yeah.
better to do. So they brought her, and she's like, "Oh, great." So somebody decided to put us together, and we started talking, and that's how we ended up meeting and getting
Nice. Okay.
eventually getting married. But along the way, because I said I wouldn't get married until I got a job and I had to finish college and all this good stuff, and we ended up going to a Tony Oxendine dance. And at a Tony Oxendine dance, he got word we were fan boys and girls, if you will, at the time, and he knew that we were dating, and he tried to get us married right there at the dance. He was going to play officiant of ceremonies. When are you going to marry the girl? I mean, he's on the mic. I am red as can be.
Yeah.
This is not me. And I had guys coming up with tie slides at the time for rings and everything. Oh, I'm like, oh my dear Lord. Yeah. So that's our initial mixings with Tony Oxendine and how we got, meeting with him. And he doesn't forget anybody. I haven't
Yeah.
seen Tony in 10 years, and all of a sudden we walk in, hey Paul, and this guy, I don't know how he does that.
Yeah. You're not the first one to tell. I've heard people that you hadn't seen him in 20 years. They walk
Exactly.
into a dance and he's like, "Hey, Mike, how you doing?"
Right.
It's amazing.
It is
Some people's
utterly
memories. You know,
amazing. But and Larry Letson was the guy, we sat down in a hotel room and I was ready to hit the road. I wanted to hear all about it, what it was like and everything else. And Larry's like, well, he told me that, hey, dude, you need to reevaluate. He go get your degree so you have something to fall back on.
sure.
And I was kind of thankful for that because if I would have hit the road, I wasn't that good and I wasn't practicing. So I would have been, you know, it was just a dream at that point, and I don't think I would have made it. And then it would have been a prolonged, I wouldn't have met my wife and look at all this good stuff that happened because of Larry Letson. So,
Wow, that's great. That is a
yeah.
great story. So, and we talked now. We met at the South Carolina convention and got to spend some time together just not long ago. And you were telling me that you're mainly one night parties and party nights. Tell me about that because, like, we in our conversation, I've done a few, and there's times that I dread them.
Yep.
Just because the initial part of it. But once I'm there, I love it. So tell me how you got into that and where that's what you're doing with it.
Okay, so to get into it, I think it happened with Doug, the guy who originally taught me. Um, he was the one who pushed me to say, you want to make some money to help yourself get through college. You need to like do some of these party nights. Well, that was going out on a limb for me because I was not the guy to have
Sure.
any business in front of a microphone or in front of a crowd. But I ended up picking up. There was a farm probably 6 miles from my house, and they always did September, October, November hayride season, and people would book the barn. And they assumed a square dance caller came with it because every time they'd been there, it was somebody there, Tom Bankstall or somebody else had been there. And I lived 10 minutes away. And one night somebody booked a party and they assumed they were going to have a square dance caller and they must have had 40, 50 people there at the party and everything else. And there's no caller.
Right.
And I had given my card to the barn and to other people. And somehow I get a phone call and it says, hey, can you grab your stuff and come on out?
Wow.
And I was doing nothing and I was probably pretty broke at the time. And I said, yeah, okay. And 10 minutes away, and I called a 2 hour, 2.5 hour dance and home. Well, that was the start. So that's how
Wow.
I first began, and I would just fill in when nobody was around. And then eventually one of the callers quit calling at the barn, and so I moved in. So that barn was, you don't get a dance closer than 10 minutes away.
No, no,
Yeah.
absolutely.
They're 2 hours. So um, I did that for, oh geez, the whole time I was living at home. So that would have been 82 to about 88, 89, somewhere in that ballpark. I was always on call. And I eventually started getting bookings from that. So I won't say it was anything crazy, but there was a couple of years that mid-September to mid-November, every Friday and Saturday, I was
Wow.
doing one nighter over at a couple, probably that had to be probably mid-90s when it was still pretty popular. Um, when I left my club in 2005, I still love the activity. I just couldn't do the 6 nights a month anymore with the kids and leaving my wife home. And so I started picking up parties. I said, well, that's one way I can still stay into it and maybe convince people that, hey, this is still a cool activity. It's kind of
Sure.
fun. So I just kept going and kept going. It kind of wiped me out around COVID, like everybody
Sure.
else. And I looked back, I was looking at my records prior to this meeting, and in 21, I did 10 party nights. In 22, I did 11. 23, I did, I think, 12. Last year, I did 37.
Jeez.
That
That
was
is
huge for me. So
wow.
I'm calling as much as some of these guys
Absolutely.
calling
Yeah.
everywhere. I'm calling parties. Out of those 37 parties, some of those were mine. I decided to try something different because I still miss the activity, but to be honest, it's dead in my area. I mean, if I drive to the closest city to me is 45 to 50 minutes away, there's one club there. They don't teach any lessons, and they have usually about 2 squares.
Wow.
The next club is an hour and a half south, hour south. They have a pretty good turnout, but they don't have more than about 3 or 4 squares. I don't know of anybody else. I've gone to a couple big dances in Michigan, 1 square dancing, 2 squares dancing.
That's rough.
I went to a Jack Platty's dance. There wasn't very many there. It was maybe 4 or 5 there. Michigan just doesn't have people. So I did some research and started looking around, and there used to be 20 clubs within an hour of where I live now. It's just gone away. And I said, well, you know what? Maybe I can. I knew I was coming up on retirement. Maybe I can do something. This is my chance to give back. I never practiced. I never put a lot of activity or effort in the activity when I was young. This is maybe my chance to make it right. Is kind of how I said to myself. So last February, I did a dance. It's probably about an hour away from here, and I've done it for 4 years in a row now. And we have between 9 and 13 squares that show up. They call it a night out with friends. It's a wedding hall for the rest of the year. They advertise in the off season. This is February. A night out with friends. If you want to come out, come on out. And they sell tickets in advance, and we've sold it out every year for 4 years.
Nice.
And it's a hoot. The last time you had 13 squares dancing and hooting and hollering, and it reminds me of the good old days. And honestly,
Yeah, I've been to state conventions where you don't have 13 squares in a hall.
exactly.
You know, so that's impressive. That's
So
good.
we only do it once a year. I tried to get them to do it again, but I get it. They want to keep it special, so it is special.
Sure.
This year they turned away 35 people. They don't have room. But I took the video of the event last year, and in February I posted it on Facebook, and I said, "Hey, look at this!" More or less, having a great time. And all of a sudden, I started getting some traction from the area. I mean, enough traction that I'm spending an hour after work on Facebook answering people. And I'm like, I'm teaching school. I can't, I'm grading papers. I can't do this. And, and this is fairly regularly, at least 3 or 4 times a week. I'm down here answering people, blah, blah, blah. So I figured out how to make a Facebook group. So
Now, do you think that's just in the time that this has been going on? Is that word of mouth, or is that like internet? How are you getting this out there?
So it's a good question. So I'll tell you what I did. I don't know if it'll work for other people. If it does, hey, all the power to them. I think it starts word of mouth.
Okay.
And I think it spreads from there. And I think you get your core group. But I think social media is what pushed mine over the edge. I think for this dance night out with friends, it was already sold out without social media. I think until this year. This is the first year it wasn't. And then I pushed it on social media and we got it sold out. But I think it's word of mouth for the most part. Still is the best vehicle. But what I decided to do was I decided to get on Facebook and join all the local groups around me.
Right.
Not the garage sale groups, but all the city groups and everything else. And then I started putting that video. Hey, wouldn't this be a great time out? Blah, blah, blah. Into these groups. And I'm crazy to say, but I've kept records. I've got 425 people following my group. Of that 425, I can honestly look and find the stats in Facebook. About 225 are local to me. The rest are from all over the world or different states, but I can hard press about 225 people. So what I decided to do, this is where it is now. What I decided to do was, we have always, at least in my experience, we have always more or less begged people to come to a class. Mm-hmm. We've advertised a class, come join a class, come join a class, come join a class. And I've been thinking for years, as my one night party business has been escalating, what if we go the other way? What if we show them the good time first?
Yeah.
And then no pressure. So what I started doing was I started round robining my area. And I put on my own party night. I found a hall, I found another hall, I found another hall, found another hall. And I put on a party night here, and I put on a party night here, and I put on a party night here, put on a party night, and I just keep going around in circles. And I've done that about 2 or 3 times now in the circle. And I went from nobody. I paid for the hall, went broke, and I've gotten about 4 to 4.5 squares showing up now. People coming out for a good time.
Now, do you, with the in the round robin,
Yep.
in the different places you've done it, do you see some of those people are going to those other places when they find out you're doing it?
It's probably about 25% or less
Okay, okay.
following.
But you do have some that'll move
I do
around
have
with
some
you.
that are moving
Okay,
around. It's probably
gotcha.
close to 20% that are actually on a repeat. And that varies by time too. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So,
Right.
but I'll take it because the way I look at it, what's coming to these one night parties that I'm throwing is more than we're showing up to dances.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
And
Mhm,
so now what I've done is I've done this for, I started this last February, really pushing this
mhm.
circle. So it's just over a year. And now I'm saying, hey, are you interested a little bit more? Because if you are, so I'm
Yeah.
going to try a class starting up in one area in June, and I've got another class in another area starting in September, another class starting in another, and I'm pushing it now, saying, hey, you've been to these party nights. They're not crazy different from one night to another. I mean,
Right.
because you got beginning moves, you can't do a whole lot of stuff. You got to get some
Right.
basics down. And now I've got some people that said, "Ah, no, we weren't interested." And I surveyed the people because I'd survey on Facebook. Hey, if there was a class coming up, would you be interested in going? Nope, just more interested in a night out, no strings attached. Blah blah. That went on for
Mm.
6 months. Now there's about 6 or 8 people that are starting to say, "Hey, yeah, maybe I might be interested in something else." Okay, it still might not be time yet for a class. I'm not sure. I'm gonna try. But I'm thinking I'm starting to convince some people a little bit in the area that, hey, maybe we'd like to get into something. So that's my goal. This is my give back, if you will. Um, Trying to see if I can work it from the other way. This is the hardest thing I've ever done.
I imagine it is. I mean, it's tough trying to sell something like this because
I always walked into clubs that were done. I was the young guy. Oh, yeah, dude, just come. And we were officer. I didn't have to do anything. I just come in and call. Oh my goodness. Find
there's
the hall, make the contacts, get the social media is a job in itself. Dear Lord. Um, yeah, check out the social media. You'll understand. And it's pushed all over the place. And I must belong to, I don't know, 50 different groups. And I just keep pushing it out. Here's a video from this would be a great night. And I also push for the party night for me too, because that's hey, maybe they'll hire me for a party. And but I'm having a party on May 10th, or I'm having a party on, come on out, no experience, no funny dress. We don't have to just come out and have a good time. And by the way, here's a little music clip of what we were doing. So
I
interesting.
will tell you this, after we talked,
Yep.
and I went back and I have a couple of clubs now. And again, we're small clubs for the
Yep.
most part, numbers wise. We get a few visitors here and there, but I had talked to one of my club president, and I said, hey, you know, we recruit and they do the Facebook stuff and all that, and
Yep.
we'll get 4 people sign
Yep.
up for lessons, and
Mhm.
then of those 4, you might get 3 that
Mhm.
once you say, hey, this is going to be 14, 18 weeks, maybe depending on what we're
Right.
doing,
Right.
somebody's going to be like, oh man, I can't commit to that, and you lose another one. So
You're
now
right.
we're doing classes for 2 people, and I'm like, what are we doing? And
Right.
so I told I spoke with Laura and Dan Campbell, the other club caller for my club and for our club. And I said, hey, let's do a party night where we invite everybody. We're in Calhoun, Georgia.
Okay.
I'm in Atlanta, but my club is in Calhoun, Georgia.
Right. Right.
And I said, hey, let's just put the word out, not to Facebook. If you're sending it out, you're sending it to your square dance friends.
Right.
They don't need to know about your lessons.
Nope.
Um, so I said, hey, let's just do for Calhoun, for that area, a
Right.
party night.
Okay.
Because like we have talked, I've done a few,
Right.
and I'll get 30, 40 people at a wedding anniversary or a birthday party.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, this is not, I don't know what's going to happen here. And there is so much energy, and they're just like, oh my gosh, squared it. And, and I'll
Yeah.
play the traditional stuff, and then I'll get into some good music,
Right.
recent stuff, whatever.
Right.
And but yeah, I spoke with Laura, and I was like, hey, let's do this.
Right.
And that was like 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
We have one this Thursday coming up
Okay. Okay.
in Calhoun, and in July she's got another one. And they put it out like on the art center where we dance.
Yeah.
They put it out on their web page and all that. So hopefully, you know, I don't know, we might get 10, we might get 100 that come out. And I said, let's just get a bunch of email addresses. And
Exactly.
if we can get 10 or 15 people, let's start classes next week after next,
Exactly.
because
Exactly.
the problem is we'll do this recruiting or other clubs, not my clubs,
Right.
and they'll have a group of people come out for a party night, and
Mhm.
they're like, "Hey, you really enjoy this? It's July." They'll come back
Exactly.
in January when
No,
you're not getting a single person back.
you're
Okay,
right.
so
I know exactly what you're saying.
I took the little conversation we had at
That's
Joe
right.
Arnold's house,
Let me
and
know
I
how it
was like,
goes.
you know what?
Let me know how it
Because
goes. It's going to take more than once to try. Don't give up on it either.
yeah,
Because I did. My very first one, I was ready to give up. I had nobody show, so I
mhm.
paid the hall. And then one hall was $100, and that was the hall I used to call in when I was calling for a Flushing club. And I went up there, and I I made I made my money back. I broke even. I was happy. We had two squares of people that had never been out. Then I did one in Grand Blanc. We had nobody, so I paid the hall. Thank you, and they were nice enough. They said, "Hey, I tell you what, we'll cut you half. Pay half the rent. Attribute the next half to the next time you come out." Well, the next time we came out, we had two squares, and then we did it again, and we had three squares, and then we did it again. We had three and a half, and so it's starting to grow. But and then I'm asking those people there, hey, just in a non-threatening, hey, you got to have more. Hey, if you're interested in the class, let me know. Follow my Facebook page. There'll be something advertised there. And it's no hard sell. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. I'm just here to have fun.
Yeah.
You're here to have fun too. And I bill it all the way. It's just, let's come have some fun. I had one couple that made me laugh so hard. They were at one of I think it was at my November dance with two squares. They brought another couple on a mystery date night, took them out to dinner, and then brought them to a square dance. They had no idea they were coming. They had a ball. They've been back to one or two other ones now.
Wow, nice.
They're not ready for a class, at least not yet, but it's that kind of thing, and it's word of mouth. So now they've talked to a couple other friends. I think it'll be a bigger mystery date night one of these nights. That hey, you each get a couple and bring them out, and we're just gonna have some fun for 2 hours. And
That's a great idea. Yeah,
it's been working for me. I don't know if it'll work for everybody else, but and all I do is I like search the next city over for Facebook, and I look for the public groups and some of the private groups, depending on what they are. I don't want to get involved in politics and anything like that, but if they'll let me join, and then I'll post, hey, we're having a dance here. Come on out. No experience necessary. Just come up for a good time. Square dancing has changed. It's totally different. More information. Check this out. No pressure. And I post that once a week, and it takes me an hour to get through all my posting at least. It's a job, but I'm thinking I'm doing something right because I'm having numbers go up.
And it sounds like it. In the little bit that I get to travel and all that, the numbers they are what they are. And
yeah,
I've never seen them go up. I'll see them stay the same.
right,
I'll see them go down.
right.
But I've never gone into a club and go, man, we picked up 3 squares last year off of lessons.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's when
it's rough.
That night out with friends that I talked about before. I mean, I look forward to that one every year because I know it's going to be a sold out, and that's a hoot. Holy cow, 12 squares. Oh, that's a good old day. I think they could dance 13 max. And if they were to dance in the side, they might get one or two more, but 12 or 13 squares. And I have guys that come up to me at that one in particular, but they're like, hey, I don't know how to dance. I'm like, you don't need to. That's my job. You just have fun. You know your left and right. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're just gonna have some fun tonight. And they come up later on, and they are just, oh my god, I had a ball. Well, thank you. Here, take a card. Nope, I don't even mention nothing. Just here, take a card. Check me out. I got some other ones in the future, and if you ever want to come out, and inevitably somebody will say, hey, we're coming with somebody else, or we'll bring a friend out, or hey, if I can grow that in the area, and I'm hoping that it might take a little while, and I've been disheartened a little bit sometimes, but I'm having a ball with it.
No, there's going to be nights just like square dancing. You walk into a club thinking it's going to if it's a club that hires you, and you've only heard about it. And you walk in and there's 2 squares and you're like, oh man,
yeah,
and you're expecting more.
Exactly,
and that's
I
fun.
remember those days. Yep.
But the few guys that I get to talk to a lot, square dancing wise, I'm going to give you when you go back to the entertainment part. I'm going to entertain you like there's 50 squares in front of me.
You're right.
If there's one.
Exactly.
And the thing is, when I see 1 square, I'm like, this is going to be easy for me. I don't have to watch but 8 people. You know,
Exactly.
I would love to see 50. I'd love to see
Sure.
10, you
Yeah.
know.
Oh, I hear you.
Um, but when I see 1 or 2 and they're like, man, I just wish we could have got more visitors. I'm like, oh, it's okay.
Right.
It makes it easy for me.
It does.
It's not good for your club. I
No.
appreciate that because
Right.
you're having to pay us to come out.
Exactly.
Um, but man, I love what you're doing, and I'll let you know how ours goes. And
Awesome. I'd love to hear it.
we're looking forward to it. You know, but I talked to a couple of them last night. We had a dance last night, and it's really, like I said, it's 3 weeks ago we came up with this plan.
Sure.
And so I don't know what we're going to do numbers wise. I
Right.
think it'll be good, but we're really looking forward for the July one because
Yep.
we're just going to keep pushing. And
Yep.
it's just like you said, it's just no from 10. I think we advertise it from 10 to 100
There you go.
years old.
Perfect.
Come out, and
Exactly.
I tell everybody that I've had the people come to me and say, "Hey, man, I don't know how to dance," and I'm like,
Right.
first of all, if you can, and this doesn't make sense to some people, if you can walk at about 124 beats per minute,
Exactly.
you're fine.
You're
If you
fine.
can do it with rhythm, that's even better,
Exactly.
you know.
Yeah, my dad
And
couldn't find
so
rhythm to save his life, but
it's just walking, man.
yep.
You'll be fine.
Oh
And
yes.
I've never had a lady come up to me and say, I don't know how to dance.
Neither have I.
It's
It's
always
always
the
the
man.
guys.
It's
Always.
always the guy,
Yep.
you know. So
I did one yesterday. I had a birthday party. It was a 50th birthday party, and they're dancing on carpet, which I don't like, but
sure.
that's whatever. It's your venue, you know. And we're gonna have a ball. And she was a little nervous because uh, they had some young kids coming in that were probably in their, I would say 18 to 25, maybe. And then they had the adults coming in too. So we had three squares for 2 hours straight. We had three squares. We had a hoot. I mean, and the kids left the room and got away from the adults, but when the music came back on, they came back in, and it was a great time. And then that I actually got a really cool connection out of that because one of the adults was there and said, "Hey, we're affiliated with the university, and we think we want to get you in over at the university."
Oh man, that's a get right there. That's good.
You can't ask for anything more than something like that. And they said, give us some time, but we would like to see if we can get something run. At least, I don't know if it's a party. I don't know if it's something continuous. It doesn't matter. You know, it's just for me, it's like it gives me an open opportunity to show somebody else that it's so funny because I can get up in front of a group and I can say, you know, when at the end of a party, and I can say, when you heard square dancing to come in here, you got that funny look on your face. And I know what that is. They know what that is. Square dancing. Who square dances? I said, but did you have a good time tonight? And all of them are like, oh yeah,
Mm,
this is not what I thought. You know, this is not. I'm advertising it that way now. This is not your mom and dad square dance.
yeah,
This is something that's different. And I try to keep that upbeat tempo all night long. And you know, if I'm not having fun and you're not having fun, I shouldn't be here. So
sure.
that's, you know, so yeah, I'm on track right now. I think at 22 parties this year, and it's only May. And I'll be honest, there's times that the parties get to a boring part, especially if you're doing three or four back to back to back. But I keep thinking of the bigger picture. If
Sure.
I'm doing this and I get one couple or two couples that want to commit to something more, and I can keep it within an hour of my house, and that's my goal, is keeping it within an hour because
Yeah,
most people will drive up to an hour.
absolutely.
Most of it's 30 minutes, but most of them would drive up to an hour. So if I can keep circling the wagons 30 minutes to an hour away from a central point, maybe I can get them to come to a class eventually. But I'm not going to pressure them.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm not going to beg them. You know, I'm beyond that part. It doesn't look right for us anyway when we're begging and
Yeah,
begging and begging and
and
begging.
it's changing the look. Like you said, people have when you mention square dancing,
They
people who
do.
don't square dance have
Yep,
an idea in their
they
head,
do.
even if they've never heard of it.
Exactly. And
They
that's,
just are
yeah.
like, "Oh, okay, I know what you're talking about."
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Oh, that was
so
me.
just
And
what you're doing there, just with the music, you can say this isn't what you think
this
it
is
is.
definitely
You
not.
know?
And I usually start, this is, you know, my kind of beginning banter to the night would be like, I might put on, you know, dueling piano or dueling banjos on Sharpshooter. I might put that on for the very first record and say, as I'm calling to get you going, this is probably what you think square dancing is. You know,
Mhm.
and by tick number three, we're dancing to Billy Joel or we're dancing to,
Sure.
and people are like looking at you going, oh my gosh, that's not what I thought, you know.
Yeah.
But I just love watching those people and their minds change and their attitudes change. You know, I think my longest running party is 26 years now. It's a family reunion. They clean out the barn every year.
Wow.
And I've watched the kids grow up and bring kids, and now those kids have grown up and are bringing kids. And we have 7 or 8 squares that come out to this every year. I say it's my longest running beginner class because what I did, it's so funny because what I've done what I did last year, we do in the first 45 minutes. We're already
Yeah.
there. And it's a class that meets once a year and we keep moving forward. They
That's
probably know
awesome.
35 calls. I mean,
Mm.
it's just amazing. But they just want to have a good time. They don't want a commitment. And that's the other
Yep.
thing. I've on all my surveys, I would say 80 to 85% of the people I've surveyed say no commitments. No, we don't want to come back to a class. We don't want okay, I understand that. That's why I'm
Mm.
not pushing you. You know, 10 to 15% of you might want to do that. Okay, I'll take those. You know,
Sure.
so
Yeah, I've had a few people tell me over the years when it comes to the party nights, they're like, this isn't an advertisement for you. Don't go up there and just push, hey, I've got a club here if y'all want to come.
it's not even mentioned. No,
I've had a few come up to me after and they're like, so you do this all the time? And I'm like, well, I call for a couple clubs.
right.
And they're like, really? So y'all do this? And I'm like, if you want a card, you can come check us out,
Exactly.
but
Yep.
I don't
I don't
halfway
push.
through the
If you
dance go,
hired
hey, if
me,
anybody really wants to
yeah,
take
no.
lessons, so
Nope. If you hired me, my attitude is I'm not selling anything. No, I'll take business cards and I'll leave them on a pile on the
yep.
table. Inevitably, someone come ask you have a card. Yep, but I don't talk
Yeah.
shop. I don't. This is a hired event. This is not how for a party night. If it's my party night, that's totally different.
Yeah.
I will tell you, out of all the parties I've done, in all the years I've done parties, so that's almost 40 years of calling now. Um, I had a first yesterday, and at the birthday party, they asked me, well, they wanted a break in the middle. They weren't going to have cake in the middle, but then they cut it and they had cake
Mm.
and it was a break. So, and I knew it was a break. There's nothing I'm going to do. Can you tell us your story? So almost like what we're doing right here, they
Right.
the condensed version. I'm like, nobody's ever asked. And I usually wouldn't do this here,
Yeah.
but if you really want. So I gave them the condensed version of 5-minute break
Mm.
story. And but that was kind of interesting that it was a prelude to this conversation. I'm
Good.
like, wow. But
That's
yeah,
great.
I don't advertise myself. I don't advertise clubs. I don't advertise any of that stuff
Yeah.
when I'm doing a private party. If I'm doing my own version, then that's different.
Sure.
I advertise it as
Yeah, no, I
it's like a
understand.
regular
I
dance
mean,
at
I
that point.
agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when somebody hires you for,
Yeah.
because I've done a couple of surprise birthday parties.
Yep.
I've done a wedding anniversary
Yep.
where the daughter said my parents danced 50 years ago.
Right.
Could
Nostalgia.
I went to the house, we were in the backyard,
Yep.
and of course the parents really couldn't dance anymore,
Nope.
but it was all the family. And, and I had a few people like, man, so you do this all the time? I'm like,
Right.
yeah, I've got
Yeah.
a few clubs. We didn't even know this. And I was like, yeah, it still does,
Exactly.
and, so
Yep. I hear you.
once you can get them in, they enjoy it.
They do.
And if they say, hey, I'd like to do more of this, I'm like, well, here's how you can do it.
That's
But
exactly.
if they don't do that, I'm just like, hey, if y'all have an anniversary next year, y'all know my
Yep.
number.
Exactly. Thanks. Have a good night, and we'll see you.
So that's awesome. Well, Paul, man, it's been a pleasure. We're working on an hour now. I try to stay around
Nope, I
there.
get you, man.
I would love
It
to
has
talk
been.
more to you about this. Definitely, with my Thursday party coming up this
Yep.
week. I'd like to see how it goes, and I'm probably going to call you privately and
Please
ask for
do.
some more tips and go
Please
from
do. I'd
there.
be happy to.
And I would love, and somewhere down the road, whether it be 6 months, a year from now, I'd like to do this again to just see where some of your party nights are
Let's see how
going
it follows
and
through.
go from
Yeah,
there.
that would be
That's
awesome,
awesome.
man. That would be awesome.
Paul, so glad I met you a few weeks ago, brother, and it's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. And we'll do it again, man.
Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it. You have a good one.
Awesome, brother. I'll
All
talk
right,
to you
man.
soon.
All right.
Everybody, bye.
Side space, grand square, I still feel 25. Most of the time, I still raise a little cane with the boys. Alaman left and we honky tonks and pretty women. Lord, I'm still right there with them, singing above the crowd.